And well guys, FSR 3.1 has been released with no notice whatsoever. It just got released out of the blue in all NIXXES ports for PC. This means that Ghost of Tsushima got updated to FSR 3.1, Horizon Forbidden West, and Marvel Spider-Man, including the Miles Morales DLC, I like to call it a DLC. So we have 4 or 5 games already released with FSR 3.1, and God of War Ragnarok will include FSR 3.1 as well. Now, I already tested FSR 3.1 in all these games for like 2 hours, and I tested in several situations, and I can tell you right away that FSR 3.1 is a major uplift compared to the previous FSR upscaling. It works much better, it has way less shimmering, way less artifacts, and especially at lower resolutions where FSR actually suffered a lot. For example, upscaling from 1080p to 4K was fine, but as soon as you went below, let's say, below 1080p in terms of upscaling, 960p, which is actually 1440p quality, or even below that, the overall image quality after getting upscaled with FSR 2.1 and 2.2 was piss poor. While with FSR 3.1, it is way better. I even tried upscaling from 720p to 1440p, basically 1440p performance mode, and it actually worked pretty decent. And on top of that, since this is FSR 3.1, it means that we finally have the frame generation decoupled, the same way we have to the sponsor. Today's video sponsor is GVG Mall, bringing you lots of software deals like Windows 10, Windows 11, Office 2019 or 2021 with a new Windows 11 design, and for all of these you can use my SKG discount code for 30% off, getting a Windows 11 serial key for $22 and a Windows 10 one for only $15. Then use the key on your Windows settings and you'll have an activated system. Now we're running Ghost of Tsushima at 1440p, and before anything let's just start by not using any kind of anti-aliasing, or well, at least not related to the upscaling technologies. In this case let's just use the normal TAA, and let's take off the frame generation as well. And this is how it looks with TAA and no frame generation whatsoever. We're still pushing 100 frames. We do still have some shimmering here and there, for example, just standing still. If you look at the hat, you can see that the lines are shimmering a bit, and remember, this is no upscaling whatsoever, just native resolution, and even at native resolution we got some shimmering there. And that happens in some other scenarios, especially because of the rain as well, it doesn't help. We still have a bit shimmering here on this fishing rod as soon as we move around. And I believe that the native anti-aliasing was also improved, maybe because the upscaler was as well. So let's start with FSR 3 native AA. As soon as we enable the native AA, as soon as you move, for example, the fishing rod isn't shimmering as it was before natively, meaning that the anti-aliasing from FSR 3.1 is better than the native resolution, than the native TAA, definitely better. Look at this, for example, much better. And if we look, for example, at the hat, look at it, no more shimmering whatsoever, it is basically shimmering free. And as soon as we go to the upscaling, now we enable the upscaling mode, anti-aliasing, we take it off, TAA upscaler, FSR, bam, FSR quality mode. Upscaling from 960p, it is still basically perfect, no shimmering whatsoever in the hat, which is fine. If we look at the fishing rod, even with quality mode, it just works much better with way less shimmering than the native TAA, which is great. And overall the performance is just what we would expect in terms of visual fidelity. It just works great. And as soon as you go to a more vividly scene or a more vivid scene, it looks even better. If the normal FSR 3, which was actually FSR 2.1 upscaler, was already looking great with 1440p in this game, the FSR 3.1 looks even better. I mean, it just looks great. We do have the usual artifacts that we have even at native here and there, but it just looks great overall. Even if you look once again at the hat, no shimmering whatsoever. Now this game got updated to XeSS 1.3 as well, meaning that the upscaler on the XeSS side should be better. And since we're using XeSS 1.3, the ultra quality mode is now the quality mode, which is 67% of the render resolution or the native resolution. Even with XeSS 1.3, look at the hat. As soon as you move it, we got shimmering there. We don't have shimmering with it stopped, But as soon as we move a bit in this part specifically, look, we do have a lot of shimmer in those lines, and it is actually way more blurred out than I would expect, at least in this scenario. As soon as we go once again to FSR 3 quality mode, let's apply it, let's do the same, and yeah, as you do this, virtually no shimmering whatsoever. Yeah, it seems that we do have a bit of ghosting, almost unnoticeable, and definitely when playing you won't notice anything, but if you look closely at it, you can see that we do have a bit of ghosting. But besides, overall, in terms of general quality, I believe it looks better than XeSS, at least in this game, of course. Now, one of the things that we have with FSR 3.1, like I told you, is that we can use frame generation outside of any kind of upscaling technique. Now, I'm using frame generation with FSR 3 quality. As you can see, it just works fine. 160, and by the way, I have the VSync on, that's why it is at 160. No biggie, no issues whatsoever. As soon as you go once again, you say, well, I don't really want any kind of upscaler, but I also don't want TAA, I want FSR 3 native AA. Just enable FSR 3 native AA, that looks very good. Much better than the upscaler. For example, in terms of shimmering, if you look here, even on those wood parts that we have there, yeah, we got no shimmer whatsoever as with upscaling we do. Meaning that, yeah, you can still have lots of FPS and at the same time have a way better image quality. And if you want to use XeSS instead, just do the same. XeSS, ultra quality, and FSR 3 frame generation will just work easily with it. No problems whatsoever, and we're now running XeSS plus FSR 3 frame generation. Now this is a very interesting scene to test with Ghost of Tsushima, and we start using TAA only, basically native resolution 1440p, ultra wide. Now look at the armor. The armor is different, and we are running into a scene where, well, shimmering might happen, way more shimmering and ghosting, because we have here the fire particles, and we have another armor where you can see that it shimmers a lot more. Look at the armor. Not only the hat now, but we have the grass shimmering, we have the armor shimmering. But as soon as you enable the FSR 3 anti-aliasing, native AA, as you can see, no more shimmering whatsoever in the armor, and it looks way better than the native TA implementation. Now if you look at the fire particles, they're also fine. We have a bit of drag here and there, kind of a ghosting effect here and there, but only on the really small particles. The other ones are actually quite fine. Now let's see how it handles the quality mode in terms of upscaling in this scene. As you can see, even with the quality mode, we're not running TAA, even the quality mode upscaling from 960p is better in terms of general quality than TAA. We got way less shimmering than TAA, look at this, works fine, but at the same time FSR 3 quality does have a bit more of ghosting compared to the previous FSR 2.1. The 3.1 does have more ghosting, the temporal stability is better, but we do have more ghosting. I mean, if you look like this, if you play normally, there's no difference whatsoever. You can't really notice. You just won't be able to do it. But if you look really closely to those tiny parts, the difference is there. But overall, even on the fire particles and so on, even the quality mode in terms of upscaling, as you can see, motion artifacts and so on, even the LSS has them, so there's nothing really relevant here. And by the way, I almost forgot about this. Remember when I told you about the upscaling from lower resolutions? We're upscaling from 960p, which is already a quite low resolution, as you can see, FSR 3 quality, but let's now go to 720p. 1440p performance mode, where FSR was actually dog shit, upscaling from that low resolution, and look at FSR 3.1. I mean, it doesn't look great because we're upscaling from 720p, but it looks much better, but many times better than FSR 2.1. Perfectly playable. I mean, I could play the game like this. I wouldn't maybe enjoy it as much as I did with a higher resolution or higher pixel count, but I could definitely play the game like this. It wouldn't be a deal breaker, while with FSR 2.1 and other ones, it would definitely be a deal breaker, as the quality would be, well, like I said before, really bad. Now with Marvel Spider-Man, and in case you don't know, Marvel Spider-Man didn't actually have any kind of frame generation. We only have FSR 2.1, not even the 2.2, as the 2.1 in some cases is actually better. And in here we actually have a very interesting scenario, because for example in this part, as I was testing in this video passing right now in the screen, you can see that I tested XeSS 1.1 that was previously implemented in this game versus the XeSS 1.3 that is now implemented as well versus FSR 2.1 that we had here before. And FSR 2.1 was a shimmery mess in this title here, in the specific part where the net would shimmer a lot. Something that doesn't happen here, of course, because we are at native resolution, but let's now enable the upscaling technique FSR 3. On the game it shows FSR 3 only, I don't really know why, they should say FSR 3.1, but anyways, look at the net here, and you can see the difference. We do have a bit of shimmer because it is raining, and the net just doesn't, the upscaler just doesn't really work well with it, but as you can see, the shimmer is basically gone. The temporal stability is much better, not even comparable, while with FSR 2.1, it just would shimmer a lot across this and many other scenes. But overall, FSR 3 quality works pretty well, 160 frames here. Pretty nicely working. Basically it works well as it should from the beginning. Now, as you saw before, FSR 3.1 works much better in terms of lower resolution, so let's try the performance mode once again to see how it goes. Remember, using the performance mode we're upscaling from 720p. That's like a 2012 resolution, even not there, like 2009 resolution. And we are upscaling from 720p to 1440p, and like I told you before, with Ghost of Tsushima, it is not great, but definitely playable. I might even say, and I'm almost certain of it, that FSR 3.1 upscaled from 720p, so basically FSR 3.1 performance mode delivers better quality than FSR 2.1 quality mode, while delivering much better FPS. Quality mode once again, and yeah, of course, much better looking. In terms of artifacts, well, we have some motion artifacts here and there, because as they improve the temporal stability, basically reducing shimmering, in some cases there will be the dragging artifacts, which we call ghosting, and that happens due to the increased temporal stability. If we go and enable the frame generation, oh my bad, frame generation, bam, FSR quality with frame generation, and we have 300 frames in Spider-Man, because as you know, frame generation doesn't really care about CPU bottleneck, so even if your CPU bottlenecked, frame generation will push over those frames. 200 frames, like this, and yeah, it just works fine. So you can just use the frame generation from AMD in any card, almost any card can use AMD FSR 3 frame generation, and you can just go here, once again, XeSS, ultra quality, bam. If you like XeSS over FSR 3.1, if you still like XeSS more, you can just use it with FSR 3 frame generation and still have a huge increase in FPS, while having an increased image fidelity, if you think that's the case. And now with Ratchet Clank, and we're running the maximum settings apart from ray tracing, but if you want to, I can actually enable ray tracing. I mean, yeah, basically ray tracing set to high, and we're running 1440p native with high ray tracing, and we're hovering around the 70 FPS. In some cases it drops to 60 from what I've seen so far. In some others it just runs fine at 80, something like that, as you can see. And Ratchet Clank is actually the first game where I believe that XeSS is really better than FSR 3.1. I mean, FSR 2.1 was actually kind of okay in most games, okay-ish, but in this game it was really badly and poorly implemented. It was just a pain in the ass to look at it. But FSR 3.1, although it is not great per se, it is pretty decent. As you can see, this is native implementation. As soon as we go to upscaler, we have once again the frame generation decoupled, which is lovely. FSR 3 quality mode. Now, as soon as we enable FSR 3 quality mode, it looks great. I mean, in terms of general quality and sharpness, it looks better than TAA. But in some scenarios we do have a lot more shimmer. For example, in these parts with odd reflections, the upscaler just doesn't work really well with it. And we have lots of these, as you can see in the ground, for example. We have lots of these with Ratchet and Clank, and it just doesn't work well with it. Now, this is with ray tracing especially, because if you're using the game or if you're playing the game without ray tracing, the FSR 3.1 upscaling will work better, way better. It works generally good, much better than 2.1, but still suffers a lot with the reflections. As soon as you enable, for example, XeSS, you go to XeSS 1.3, you go to Ultra Quality, you apply the changes, and yeah, you can see it works really poorly with the reflections as well. We have some water here running, and that's a thing that upscalers don't like to work with as well. But for example, when moving, we do have some shimmering there. If we enable FSR 3.1, my bad, FSR 3.1, bam, and as you can see, for example, in those rails we do have more shimmering than with XeSS. So it's a trade-off. It works decently well, much better than 2.1, definitely much better, but still inferior to XeSS, while in the other games it is actually superior in my opinion. Once again, in this game we didn't have the native anti-aliasing as well. Now we can use the native anti-aliasing and then enable the FSR 3 native AA. And with native AA things are different. With native AA actually works pretty nicely, but once again, look at the reflections. Yeah, I mean, it's just a pain in the ass. If you just want to, you can just use FSR 3 even with the performance mode, FSR 3.1 performance mode. As you can see, look at the look at the shimmer that we have there. But apart from these specific scenes, as you can see, apart from these specific scenes, even the 720p is actually playable. Not enjoyable, but playable. And with ray tracing disabled, you just hit apply. The FPS are obviously much higher now, even with TAA. And in those scenarios where we actually had issues with the rain, like here, let me just kill these beasts. Pam, 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 boom. You're done. Now, for example, here, since we're not running ray tracing, it already runs much better. Considerably better actually. And you can just go here, once again, without any kind of ray tracing, push the frame generation, and you have 160 FPS, because I'm using the VSync, and it works smoothly. It would achieve you, like in this card, like 200 FPS or even more, and it works silky smooth here, with no issues, much better than before with ray tracing, definitely, and just works great, smooth, almost no input latency. I mean, it's a dream. In this scenario, it's actually kind of a dream. You go there, frame generation off, upscaler technique now to quality mode, and watch the ground. See? We still have way more artifacts than with native resolution. And once again, XeSS works a bit better here, I believe, without any kind of ray tracing. Yes, without any kind of ray tracing, XeSS works better here. That's what I wanted to tell you. XeSS works better in terms of no ray tracing quality. In ray tracing quality, it still suffers a bit. My opinion, if you have a strong enough card for this game, just go enable the TAA and use frame generation with native resolution, as it will deliver you the best results that you can get. And the fourth and last game so far, featuring FSR 3.1, is Horizon Forbidden West, and I'm actually eager to play it now. I was waiting to play some other games that I had in line, let's say that, to then play the Horizon Forbidden West. And I'm actually eager to test it now, or to play it more now, since I know that I can run it at almost at 160 FPS all the time, since we now have FSR 3 frame generation and FSR 3.1 upscaler. Now, as you can see, we're running at 80 FPS, 80 something, 90, and we're running native resolution with TAA, as I'm going to show you, 1440p ultra wide, TAA. Now, let me just put alloy like this, because there are some interesting things that you want to see here. So we're running TAA, which is once again native, and we can run the XeSS native AA, because all the games here have XeSS native AA as well, the same way they have FSR 3 native AA. But in this case, the native AA, or the TAA native from Horizon Forbidden West, is actually pretty good. Not like, for example, the one in Ghost of Tsushima, where we have lots of shimmer. This one is actually good. but you can still use XeSS native AA, that once again is kind of blurred out. And then you can use FSR 3 native AA that has a way more sharpened image. But now look at the XeSS, even native AA, I don't know if you can see it, but we do have a bit of shimmering here in the hair. While with TAA we don't have it, and with FSR we don't have it as well. Now let's go to the upscaling technique because you can see this properly. XeSS Ultra Quality. Look at the hair, I will zoom out in the video. Or zoom in the video, and you can see that we have the hair shimmering, and I can notice this in real life. Like playing the game, I can notice this in some scenarios. The hair is shimmering. For example, the bag she has here is also shimmering a bit. Here in the background we have more shimmering, but as soon as I enable FSR 3, in this case FSR 3.1, yep, no more shimmering. The hair is not shimmering anymore. The bag is not shimmering as well, and here the foliage in the background is not shimmering as well. So in terms of shimmering, FSR actually surpassed XeSS now. We have XeSS 1.3 in these games that is already much better than the 1.1 and 1.2 in terms of shimmering, as you saw for example once again in this video passing right now on the screen. But even there, I mean, it's just much better. FSR 3 just surpassed XeSS 1.3 in terms of shimmering, at least in Horizon Forbidden West and Ghost of Tsushima. There are some other games where it might perform worse. As soon as we go to FSR quality, we go to 100 frames, which is not that much. Well, but since I'm using the power saving mode profile on my 7900 XTX, it is normal that these things might happen because it is only boosting to 2400 MHz. Otherwise the performance difference would be bigger, but still, FSR quality just looks great. Not as good as TAA, of course. TAA looks very good in this game, definitely, but at the cost of more FPS. But if we go to TAA or even FSR, once again TAA, yeah, it just looks great, definitely. Less sharpened, but great, and still has a bit more shimmering here and there than FSR 3 native. But if we go to FSR 3 native, once again we go from 98, and I always go to the graphic settings, from 98 to apply 92. We lose a bit of FPS, but in my opinion, if you can, just use FSR 3 native here, and then just go to the frame generation. Just enable the frame generation, bam, and we go to 140 something, and it performs much better. It is interesting though that in some games the frame generation actually doubles your frames, but in this game, I mean, it just didn't do it. But at least we're getting 140 frames, and the game just looks great. The quality is just very, very good. And if once again we want to use XeSS or FSR 3.1 upscaling, and here I'm going to graphic settings once again, upscaling mode, FSR 3 quality, bam, 160 FPS, and of course it will give me more. It will give me more than that.
Any luck?
I guess I have to go there.
But scanning the area with my focus activated, show me.
And one of the worst points of FSR 2.1 was actually the animations, the translucent pixels around the animations, meaning that when moving like this, for example attacking like this, Eloy's weapon would look very, very bad, while here we have way better quality, even upscaling from 960p to 1440p. Yes, the weapon just looks much better. It's a major improvement. We still have a bit of ghosting if we look closely, but much better than the translucent pixels that we got around the weapon when attacking. It's just a major improvement over FSR 2.1. That's a given. Major improvement. And then you can just once again use it with frame generation, and it just makes it better. Much better. And you can use frame generation without any kind of upscaling, which makes it 3 times better. And just to finish here, to really finish here, we can just disable the frame generation, and let's try the performance mode as well, upscaling from 720p2, and see how it performs in this game. Well, right off the bat, it doesn't really look that bad. It just doesn't. I mean, it actually looks pretty decent. In movement, we can see that we have more artifacts in movement because we have way less pixels, but overall it just, once again, like I said to Ghost of Tsushima, and I said the same to Spider-Man and so on, it just looks decent. It is perfectly playable, while it would be impossible to enjoy the minimum of gameplay with FSR 2.1 using performance mode at 1440p. While here, it is actually decent. It still has its issues, but pretty decent. And well guys, that's all for this video, testing the 4 games with FSR 3.1 and the frame generation and even XeSS 1.3. I believe that we can have it in The Last of Us pretty soon, and many other games. If it is as easy to implement as AMD says, it will be much better, and all the games that we see so far, for example, even Starfield, if we get an update for Starfield using FSR 3.1, it will be just much better than before. It will be definitely a big improvement, because Starfield with FSR 2.2 or 2.1, I believe, it just suffers a lot from shimmering in some scenarios. It is what it is, and we have to wait. As for my opinion, I was impressed, and I will do a side-by-side comparison video comparing XeSS and some of the previous scenarios that I tested in this video passing right now on the screen, where FSR 2.1 was actually pretty poor, and it is much better now in terms of overall upscaling quality. That's all for this video, thank you very much. Leave your comment in the comment section and let me know what you think about FSR 3.1, if you already tested it or not, if you think it's great or not, and yeah, I guess I see you in the comment section and in the next video. Cheers guys.